7th grade, it's Mrs. Painter. I'm here just to talk to you a little bit about our new lesson, which is on biotic rhythms. Just wanted to review a little bit with you first. You should have this worksheet here. On this worksheet, you will see it talks about the different ecological levels. I just want to run through those real quick with you. The first ecological level is the biosphere. Okay, this is the biggest. It's anything, any place on planet Earth, in our atmosphere, in the water, anywhere that life can live, any organism at all, anything that is living. And so it would be included within that biosphere, okay? The biosphere includes the hydrosphere, which is all of the water on Earth. It includes the atmosphere, which is, obviously the air and the birds that live in it. It includes land and all the land animals. So that is the biosphere. Within the biosphere, we have particular biomes, and you learned about those right before break. And so you learned about the land biomes and the water biomes, and there's these areas where there's a similarly shared climate and living things. So we talked about all the different types of biomes, and you learned those for me. And then within a biome, there can be a couple of different ecosystems. And an ecosystem is just, again, a smaller section where living and non-living things interact. Now, within an ecosystem, there are living things. And those living things can be divided up into even smaller groups. So, for example, a community is all of the living things within that ecosystem. So let's say we're talking about a mountain with a little river or a lake at the bottom of it, okay? And so there might be things like dandelions and grass growing on the edge of the water. There might be some trees. There might be fish in the water and like squirrels and mice and deer, okay? All of those living things are a part of the community. Now, within the community, we have populations, and the populations are all of the animals of a particular group. So all of the rainbow trout are going to be a part of that rainbow trout population, and all of the dandelions are going to be a part of that dandelion population, and all of the white-tailed deer are going to be a part of the white-tailed deer population. And then from the population, we have the individual, and the individual is just the individual animals that specifically you come in contact with. So it might be not necessarily come in contact with, but specifically like a specific rainbow trout or a specific white-tailed deer or a specific dandelion that you're talking about. Those are the individuals, okay? You should have read pages 409 and 413 in your text. If you haven't done that yet, please go back and do that. When we talk about these relationships, these biotic rhythms, we're going to first talk about animals that are the same species. So, for example, eagles, okay, or tigers, okay? All of those, we're going to talk about how they relate with each other. So there's a little paragraph here on your sheet here that we're going to work on filling in. And it says, individual organisms interact with other members of their populations. Some are more solitary and only interact when mating, is that first blank. And some animals mate for life, okay? And they spend, therefore, most of their time with that mate. They might not spend it with a lot of other animals from their same species, but they spend time with just their mate. Whereas the other animal just mates and then they separate and they don't spend time together. And then other animals live in groups or colonies. They stay together, and that is for the mutual benefit of the group. So they help each other out. They hunt together. They protect each other, etc. Okay? But we also want to talk about animals that relate between species. So you might have different animals that are not the same, or even plants, okay? It's any sort of living organism and how they interact with each other, okay? So we're going to talk about a couple different ways that can happen. The first is predation. Predation, you've heard before, it sounds like the word prey, okay, or predator, and that is because there is a predator and there is a prey in predation. It's a relationship between two organisms where one eats the other, okay? You want to be the predator, not the prey. But God created this design because we need to have both in order to have all of the different animals interact with each other. As you saw yesterday when you put your, food web together, not having grasshoppers means it's going to affect those frogs a lot because they don't have the food that they need to eat, okay? And so then they might die and there might not be enough frogs for then the snakes to eat. And so every relationship needs each other, okay? So that's predation. The next is neutralism. Neutralism is where you have two organisms that share the same ecosystem, but they don't really impact each other. So think back about our mountain ecosystem that we were talking about, and you have rainbow trout swimming in the water, but then you have dandelions growing on the grass. They are both a part of the same ecosystem, but they don't really affect each other at all. So that would be an example of neutralism, where one is not affecting the other. Competition is where you have, which is the next blank, a relationship between two organisms in which they both use the same resources. So all animals need they need some place to stay, they need a home, they need food, and they need water. And so there is a limited amount of shelter, food, and water for animals to use. And so they will compete with each other in order to get those resources. And that competition can be within animals of the same species, like two white-tailed deer, both going after the same patch of grass. Or it could be two different animals that are in competition with each other. It might be an eagle and a bear both wanting that same mouse to eat for dinner. Okay? And then there's one other group of relationships I want to talk about, which is symbiosis. Hopefully you've heard of symbiosis before. It's not a new concept to you. But symbiosis is when individuals of different species, okay, so there are two different species, interact frequently over a long period of time. Okay, so different species interacting frequently over a long period of time. There are three types of symbiosis. The first is mutualism. This is where both organisms benefit each other. So an example of this would be a bee getting pollen from a flower, right? That's the benefit to, the nectar is what the bee is going after, but the bee gets nectar from the flower, and as a result, it picks up pollen and flies off to the next flower and gives some of that pollen, okay? So that would be an example of mutualism. Think mutual is they're both getting something out of it. The next is commensalism. This is a type of symbiosis that affects one organism while not affecting another. So an example of this would be a remora and a shark. Okay, a remora is a type of fish that swims around with sharks, and they swim with the shark because they're getting protection, right? The other fish aren't going to come attack them if they're right next to a great white shark, and so that remora gets that protection. But the shark really doesn't get anything out of the deal. He's not getting protection, he's not getting food, he's not getting cleaning. There's no benefit here for the shark. So that's an example of a commensal relationship. And then the third is parasitism. This is a type of symbiosis that benefits one organism and harms the other one. So it's not a good thing. So think of a tapeworm inside of an organism that's eating up the nutrients in the organism, and as a result, that host does not have the nutrients it needs to eat or to survive, okay? The organism that benefits is called the parasite, and the organism that is harmed is called the host, okay? So those are all those blanks on that worksheet. Now, your homework, which was in your packet, looks like this, okay? It's this worksheet, and you're going to fill in the definitions up here, and you're going to figure out which of these pictures goes with which of those four definitions, and then I want you to fill this out based off of what you know. So if it's commensal, one's getting a benefit and the other's not. If it's mutual, they're both getting a benefit. If it's parasitism, one is benefiting and the other one's actually getting hurt, okay? And then the last one is predation, which is where one animal is hunting another animal, okay? So we'll get on Zoom tomorrow. We'll talk through this and go over it, and make sure if you have any questions, we can go over them, okay? Anytime you're done with it and you want to hand it in, you can. Otherwise, just send it in and after we talk it through, okay? Blessings, guys. I love you. I hope you're doing well, and I'll talk soon.